founder of Crown Vita LLC. Crown Vita is a personal business that I started about a year ago that is centered on mindfulness, meta, and meaning work. Alongside that, I also work as the program manager at the Center for Mindfulness, Compassion, and Resilience at Arizona State University. We're going into our third year at ASU, and it's been a fantastic time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as this goes on as well. Personally, just a little bit of background about myself. I have my bachelor's degree in exercise and wellness from Arizona State University and my master's in kinesiology with a concentration in sports psych from Western Illinois University. I'm a former student athlete, which is actually how we met. I did my research on student athlete retirement and the phenomena that kind of goes into that process. And so during my summer internship, I came back to ASU, worked in OSAD, the Office of Student Athlete Development, and met a wonderful team, including Sharita, and worked with them on figuring out ways to kind of move athletes into this new transition. So they created a workbook for athletes who were transitioning, and realized through that work, and actually a lot of work that I had been doing beforehand, that mindfulness connected with that after the fact. So I now work at the Center for Mindfulness, doing mindfulness not only for our student athletes at ASU, but other kind of special populations, I guess you can say, including marginalized populations. I created the Equitable Mindfulness Initiative at ASU, talking about mindfulness for everyone, but really to actionize mindfulness, to break down systematic and social barriers to practicing mindfulness. And also we're, again, working with arts, working with very specialized groups on these sort of concepts. So been a practitioner for about 6 years, been a practicing meditator for about 20 of my life. So something that's really deeply rooted in the way I show up in the world, and really excited to share anything about this that we can today. So thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you so much. So, I think oftentimes, like a lot of us hear self-care, we hear mindfulness. Can you let us know what exactly is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So mindfulness itself is being in the present moment with intention. And we'll actually have a little bit of time later to practice this, which I think is really exciting, so you can get the experience of what I mean by that. But self-care, I think, and really the self-care movement has been a response to the fact that there's been a lot of stress happening in our society lately. And I guess I shouldn't say lately, but it's been felt a lot differently lately in a lot of ways. And so, as we know, or as science has told us, when we're stressed, our parasympathetic or our fight or flight reflexes come on, and it causes all of these physiological, all of these emotional and mental situations to flare up in our bodies that we can't really turn off. So these were things that really helped us in, our Neanderthal days and really in our caveman days, when we were running from saber-toothed tigers and all of these different animals. We needed to find ways to get away quickly, to hide, or to freeze, right? Now that we're more evolved, we're figuring out that we can't, this is something that, gets turned on when we find an email that pisses us off, right? When we're driving down the street and someone cuts us off, and our fight or flight reflexes immediately come on. And so what we're noticing is that we don't have a mechanism to really shut this down. We have to find ways to turn on that sympathetic system, which is that rest and digest. And so mindfulness is a really good way of taking care of yourself, because it gives you a pause in between stimulus and response, so that when you feel that sympathetic system coming on, you have a way of kind of moving away from that. So when we're talking about mindfulness, we're talking about meditation, paying attention to the present moment. A lot of it is for healthcare and health benefits, which is really great. It's also, though, for life benefits. So I like to think of mindfulness as being expansive. It's not just to help us feel calm. It's not just to help us get through a lot of our emotions, but it's also to help us connect, to relate, right? To have more compassion in situations, and to understand that in some situations, compassion and love comes with breaking down, again, those societal or cultural barriers to us being able to be in the same space with each other. And what does that look like? So I think it's a really amazing tool all around to not only help with health, but to help with the way that we're showing up and living in our lives. And it takes a lot of practice. It's a practice. So it's not something that we'll ever get perfect at. And that's, I think, the beauty of this work and the beauty of life. It's something that we can do every single day in different ways. And we can talk about that later as well. But being present and attentive in this moment right now. So if you'd like for me to do so, I'd like to do a quick practice with everyone, if that's okay.
I would love that. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right. So if you're sitting or standing, whichever is easier for you, I'd like for you to find a comfortable position. So again, if you're seating, feet flat on the floor, you can have your palms down. Palms down usually signal groundedness, or you can have your palms up on your lap, which usually signals receptivity, openness to whatever is to come. If it's comfortable for you to close your eyes, I'll ask you to close your eyes, or if a soft gaze to the floor is easier for you, that's just fine as well. Rolling your shoulders back, sitting in a dignified position, but also calm and comfortable. And let's just begin by taking a few deep breaths. Really stimulating that vagal nerve. Breathing in and breathing out. Signaling to our bodies that it's okay for us to take this time to relax. For this short practice, I'd like for you to keep your attention and awareness on the breath. So find it in the place in your body where it shows up the most, and this can be your belly or your chest, the tip of the nostrils. Just gently place your awareness and attention there as you notice the in-breath and notice the out-breath. Distractions come in the form of sounds or movements. That's normal and okay. If thoughts happen, let them. The trick and the practice is to notice those and bring yourself right back to that breath. Letting your focus and attention gently fall on each in-breath and each out-breath. Breath is a very powerful thing. Reminds us that we can control it, just like we're doing now, or that if we choose not to, we have no control. And now just allowing that reminder to sit with you as you continue to have that focus and awareness on the in-breath and the out-breath, letting your diaphragm gently fall. As we bring this short practice to a close, I'll ask you to see if you can keep this sort of attention and awareness throughout our talk today. This gentle noticing, this gentle being. And when you're ready, you can begin to move your arms and legs, taking a nice stretch in your neck and opening your eyes when it's comfortable for you, bringing yourself back into the space.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Yes.
It actually very much reminded me of hypnobirthing. I did hypnobirthing. A lot of it's about visualization, relaxation, doing meditation, and we did a lot of that. And it is very centering. It can bring you calm. And what I found about hypnobirthing is you can continue, right, these practices in everyday life, like you were saying. So every day you can do this and you can center yourself, which I just absolutely love. So I had no idea I've been practicing mindfulness. And I mean, really, I knew it was self-care, but I didn't realize, the two were connected. So thank you so much for doing that. And, I think the beautiful thing for my audience, I'm a hypnobirthing practitioner. And so, sometimes I don't think they realize that they can use those teachings afterwards and their partners can use it as well. So it really is, it's great. And I feel so great after I take the time just to relax, right? So thank you. This was like, I love making connections. This was like a great connection for me.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Absolutely. And it's funny because we use this name mindfulness, but there's so many ways that we experience it. So thank you for making that connection too, that
Yeah.
a name for something, but really there's so many things out there that are teaching us this experience. And so just to remember that as we go through it. So thank you.
Yeah, I love it. So, I think that actually kind of brings me up to, as a busy parent, I'm a mom to a toddler, a 3-year-old. I have a 1-year-old who is teething right now. I expressed to you that yesterday was a really tough day for us, for everyone, for my husband, for me, for our children. I don't know if it was the quarantine, whatever it is, we were struggling yesterday. And so I wonder, for parents who, who are busy, right? We're talking about busy parents, but parents that are also struggling during this time, how can they incorporate these exercises or other things so that they can feel centered and feel good?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And thank you so much for that question. I guess I'll talk about this in 2 different ways. So we have formal and informal ways of practicing mindfulness and meditation. And the formal practices would be what we just did right there, right? I guided you through a sitting meditation. We focused intentionally on a breath. So we took time away from something else to focus in on this one thing. And if you can find time to do that during this busy time, fantastic. I actually do a lot of my breathing practices in the morning, right as I wake up, because usually no one else is there to bother me, including my cats. I have 2 cats, and they wait, they signal for me to wake. As soon as they see my little body moving, here they come, right? So if I do it right when I wake up, I have the time and space to kind of breathe for 5 to 10 minutes on my own, and that's a great time to do it. Or right before bed, alternatively, right? It's usually those 2 times, or in the shower where we're alone and we really don't have anyone there, and we have the time to kind of focus in and hone in on ourselves. So that would be a good time, I would say, to do a formal practice, right as you wake up, right before you go to bed, or in a space where you can be by yourself, in the restroom, in the shower. That sounds weird, but seriously, it does help. I do a lot of my work in the shower too. But we also have informal practice. And so informal practice is probably a lot more of what you were talking about with hypnobirthing, where you find times during the day that you just need to check in, right? That you just need to get back to that breath, that you just need to come back to focusing in the moment. And that can be done in a plethora of ways. Eating. So we have to eat anyway to sustain ourselves. Like at the end of the day, it might be once a day, it might be 6 times a day, depending on how this quarantine is going for you. Fair. However you find yourself having to, chow down, taking the first 2 bites mindfully. So really focusing in on what that food smells like, what it tastes like, how it feels in your mouth, right? Really noticing that bite, that chew. Mindfully driving. So if you're an essential worker and you have to go into work, or you find yourself away from home, using the time in the car to use this practice, right? Informally. Noticing where you are. There's so many times I can remember getting from my house, or excuse me, not remember getting from my house to my job, right? And then being like, oh, I'm really here. Like I was on autopilot that whole time. I'm glad that happened to me. So there is an opportunity for us to use this in those everyday moments so that we're really there every single moment of that drive. So those are some ways that I think that are really great. Also, practicing mindfulness include things like journaling. So if you find it's really hard for you to sit still, I hear that all the time. Like, I'm doing it wrong if I can't sit still. First of all, you can't do this wrong. So it's, again, practice. It's all about just finding the best ways to do this for yourself. But if you find that breathing practices don't work for you, try journaling. Try writing down questions and not answering them, right? Asking yourself questions and not answering them. Try writing what you're feeling in your body right now, what you're feeling in your mind. Those things are all practices of being in the present moment. There are some things. Yeah, I think That's what I want to say about that. Are there any other particular questions about finding time during the day that you can think of that I can explain more?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think just sometimes as parents, we're like, you don't have time to, whatever. But I think just even doing the exercise that wasn't very long, right? And so, like you said, take 5 minutes, take a few minutes in the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, use the bathroom time, like whatever, you have, because I think oftentimes we do feel like, oh my gosh, I have no time for myself. And the reality is you do. And so just being aware of that and that it doesn't take that much time, and one of the things for me recently has been consistency, right? So when you talked about practice and all these things, that's truth, right? You need to stay consistent with this. It's not a once in a while thing. It's not like let me, do this exercise and see if I can get to it again. It really is making a choice to be consistent with it, and then doing it every day, giving yourself that time. And I think that's why so many people talk about self-care. I know oftentimes we feel like we're self-cared out, right? We hear self-care everywhere, but it's because it's really hard, I think, for people to just stop and say, like, I need this time for myself,
Yeah. I think there's a lot of guilt around it too. I mean, especially, I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine being a parent and saying I need that time to kind of step away and take care of myself, how guilt comes up, because I feel it not even being, someone who takes care of another life. So there's guilt around that, and sitting with the fact that, like, why does self-care feel so guilty? Because it's fulfilling. It's helping me fill my cup in a way that I can fulfill someone else's. I can't be the best person that I can be, especially in work like this. Like, I'm a provider in this way. And I think about this all the time. At the end of the day, with my, my degree and where I work, I'm a healthcare provider. And so how can I service others' well-being and health if I don't service myself? And
Yes.
self-care thing is so important. And I love your point about consistency, because sometimes I think when we think about consistency and we think about getting in these routines, we think that's the opposite of being mindful, because we're talking about moment to moment experiences. But it's actually shown that the ritualistic processes, like having consistency, like showing up every day in the morning at 8:30 to do a mindfulness practice, helps us to get out of that norm of that parasympathetic. Like, it helps us pull away from fight or flight to really tap into that rest and digest. So it's so important to be consistent in these practices. Absolutely.
Yes. And I do appreciate, there is guilt. I think there is guilt as a parent when you're doing these things. But the truth is, again, sort of, you can't pour from an empty cup. And so how do you take care of yourself so that you can take care of your family? That's what this is all about. Especially, a mom, I'm working full time. I'm trying to do this business, Parent Epiphany. It's like doing all these things. You get exhausted. It can be exhausting. And now we have our kids at home. And so, it truly is about reflection oftentimes too. Like, what do I need? In my life so that I can feel renewed. And so I appreciated you talking about the journaling earlier, because I like to write. And I just wanted to also point out, journaling doesn't necessarily have to be, handwritten in a journal. I think oftentimes people hear journaling and so they automatically think that, and it can take in so many forms. My blog, for example, is my writings that I had actually recently while I was pregnant with my daughter. Throughout our pregnancy and postpartum, I had so many things going on health-wise, emotionally, mentally, that I needed to capture all of these feelings, all of these thoughts. And then it turned into my blog. So it doesn't have to be a handwritten journal. It literally can be words in a Google document or in your notes on your phone, however you feel comfortable, right? It goes back to what is comfortable for you, and how can you help yourself? And then, I think there is no right way, right? Like you said earlier, there is no right way. So find out what works best for you and do that, right? And, I think part of, and I don't know, maybe I'm getting into this a little too much, but I wonder if mindfulness and self-care means having deep conversations with your partner, if you're with someone and saying, I need this time. Do you find doing this work that those conversations are necessary?
Oh, absolutely. And that's such a great observation. Great question, great insight. Um, I think when we talk about the health benefits of this work, that's like the surface level, right? That we're talking about what can you do with mindfulness to help physically get you over the hump. But the more people practice this and the more work that we instill around this work, especially in presentations, events, and workshops, we find that people are responding by saying, the more that I practice this, the more that I'm realizing that I'm becoming braver in spaces, or I feel more vulnerable. I feel like I'm guard up, or I have a guard up, or I want to break that down and have tougher conversations. And so one of the things we actually initiated at the Center for Mindfulness under the Equitable Mindfulness Initiative was these gatherings. And I'm going to tell you kind of about the gatherings to go back to this conversation of having vulnerable conversations with your partner. But basically, it was a response to the fact that there are so many things happening right now in the world that we're not gearing ourselves up for having difficult conversations about, right? Like we're just ignoring them. We're moving out through, we're moving through our day-to-days so that we can try as much as possible to just make it to this next thing. And so that's what we're used to doing. That's what's normal for us. And when our students, our faculty and staff told us, that's not enough now. Like there's a lot of things I need to say. There's a lot of things I need to express. And I just want a space to do it. We responded with saying, great, here's a platform. Here's a curriculum to do that. So in response to having these tough conversations with your partner, there are some things that I absolutely believe that you can do to help initiate that conversation and help to kind of hold space in that way. The first is, if possible, start with a breath together, one breath. That's it, right? Like it doesn't have to be a whole big thing, but just saying, can you sit with me for just a moment? And then before we start saying, I just want to touch you for a second and let's just take a breath together. Starting with some sort of practice that kind of grounds you in the situation and what's to come is really, really helpful. And that's what we found when we were having these hard conversations. As the person who is going to be expressing whatever you need to express to your partner, and or as the person on the other side, holding space is really important. And we had a whole session, I guess you can say. We have midday mindfulness each day. We had a whole session on holding space just yesterday. And we talked about how holding space for yourself means giving yourself permission to be vulnerable, to give yourself the pep talk enough to have a difficult conversation, but also holding space for someone else is being the watcher. And so giving your partner some directions on what you want them to do in that moment, right? I want you to be here just to listen. I want you to be here just to kind of hold the space for me, just to watch. Or I want you to be here to fix it. So this whole conversation is so that we can fix this thing together. Or I just want you to be here to listen. Or not listen, laugh, action, fix. So action, what are we going to do? Actionize around it. So fixing is different than actionizing. Maybe we don't fix it, but let's do something different next time. So really telling your partner what you need and holding space for yourself and for them in that way is something really good about this. But practicing mindfulness yourself opens yourself up to having more of those difficult conversations. And so I would say, as much as you can, do the work. Like sit with yourself, do these breathing practices, do this informal mindful work, and see how that gives you some strength to kind of want to be truthful and want to open up in that way.
Excellent, thank you. I do wonder. I was thinking earlier, when maybe you are attempting. I've heard of apps called like Headspace, right? I've heard Headspace. Oftentimes, are those things that you encourage? Do you think that you can just start on your own? Like where would someone start? Let's say they're hearing us and they're like, wow, I need this in my life. Where can we start?
I love this question. I absolutely recommend that you use any apps that work for you. I personally use Insight Timer. Is an app that if I don't want to kind of be in silence with myself and I need something that guides me through a meditation, then I go on Insight Timer. And there's plenty of different meditations and mindfulness practices, or even discussion topics, which is kind of what we talked about too on this particular app, that you can look up for sleep, for transitions, for sicknesses, all types of things. You can find it on here. So if you're looking to start, an app would be a perfect way to do that. Another thing to do, if you have time, and a lot of people are doing this now through Zoom or through an online platform, which is really great because of what's happened with our current climate. But find a community. If there's a community out there that's doing this work and you're interested in kind of joining but don't know where to start, look it up. Look up your neighbor, in your neighborhood, and see if there's somewhere that you could go, whether it be on Zoom or physically, that you can kind of start these practices with. Community is really important in this work too, because it's such it's so deep. It's such a deep practice that having a space where you can hold this practice with other people really helps you to want to continue. If not, and those two things don't feel right to you, go on Google, look it up, pull some scripts yourself, and start practicing. So I think that's the beauty of this work, is that, I didn't make it up. The West didn't make it up. The medical community didn't make it up. Mindfulness is an ancient practice, and it's been something that's been around from the beginning of time in different cultures and different millennia. So there's so many different ways to practice. And again, if there's something that you're like, well, I think this sounds cool, but the things that you're saying aren't really resonating with me yet, go on Google, look up some things, and find what works for you. I'm totally okay with it.
Excellent. I appreciate you talking about community, because I think oftentimes we think, again, it's, mindfulness. You're thinking, okay, I'm by myself, I'm doing this meditation. And, for single parents, for people who maybe don't have a partner, or whatever the case is, maybe their partner doesn't want to do it or interact. And so, to not feel isolated, right? Or maybe feel like you have no one to go to, I think that's especially important, to have community and have people, who are like-minded, that can support you and encourage you to do it. Because again, right, this practice thing, it's very easy when you are doing it yourself and life gets busy to put on the back burner. So thank you for that. I'm trying to think what else for busy parents. I'm trying to scenarios, and I don't know. Can kids use mindfulness? Is there like an age to start? I was also thinking about that, myself. My kids, Logan has shown some interest in, just being like meditative, even just sitting for like a minute, and he's 3 years old. So it makes me a little bit curious to know if there's an age where someone should start.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll start by saying I am not a professional in mindfulness for kids, but I am around a lot of professionals for mindfulness for kids. So I can also send you some resources after this of people who are really good in this work. I will say that from what I understand and know, starting kids as early as possible is amazing, is fantastic, because it gives them the opportunity and the space to kind of work through feelings and emotions that they might have in a different way than they normally would respond. We said earlier, and going back to kind of the health benefits of this, what mindfulness does is give you that pause so that you can choose how to respond in a situation. And so being able to practice this even for a minute, right? You can find yourself or, your son, your daughter, your crew kind of in the living room and just sitting. Let's see if we can sit for a minute. Having just that consistent minute every day will give them an understanding, to trigger something in the brain that later on, when something happens, it'll signal, hey, I can take a moment right here and think about what needs to come next. So it starts that process off really early, which is good, because we need to have more, mindful kids, I think, in the world that become mindful adults. It starts that process off pretty early. Yes.
Yes, because especially when you mentioned, road rage, I do think there's people are very quick to react. And so it's like, okay, maybe if we have just taken a minute, right? Think about the situation, think about my next actions or whatever those consequences, then maybe things wouldn't have happened, or I don't need to react in this way. And so I think, that's a very good point about, and I also appreciate it, that's a real life example. I think oftentimes people do feel triggered, especially when they're driving, they're in a space, and just pausing, right? Taking that pause, and getting refocused. Yes. I'm like, I needed to take a breath there, girl. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing power,
Yeah.
Viktor Frankl, he was a Holocaust survivor. And if he can say this, I'm like, there's a lot of people out here who can say this too, who could use this practice. But he said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose response. And in that power lies our growth and our freedom. And so when that's profound. That's big. It's like, you telling me that this practice is gonna give me my growth and my freedom. But when you really think about that, just like you said, in some circumstances, responding to road rage in that way could be life or death. And so how do we take the opportunity to think about what it is we want to say, how we want to say it, how we want to respond, so that we're more we're taking the time to be more true to ourselves, right? That's growth in that freedom part. And if you choose to respond in another way, then you chose that, right? Mine doesn't tell you it has to be a positive response. It just tells you whatever the response is yours.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Excellent. Well, and again, sorry, I'm going to bring up hypnobirthing, but it does remind me again about hypnobirthing, because part of it is, birth is unpredictable. So when you're in situations that can become stressful, or there is unknown, right, and you're not really sure about the next steps, hypnobirthing teaches us to pause and think about, what are my next steps? Okay, right? Like, what can happen immediately? What are the options? Do I have time, right? Additional time to think about it, or do I have to react in this moment? And just being aware that there are options, right? So whether that option is to react immediately, or asking, right, your care provider, hey, I need 30 minutes to go over, what you've just told me, and then I can make a decision. But that's one of the things that I truly liked about hypnobirthing was I felt like it empowered me and my husband to say, I need this space so that I can react in the way that I want to. Yeah. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful thing. This is great.
Thank you. Yes, that is, perfect example of kind of bringing this all to the forefront and in the moment, specifically with this population. That's it. That's power. That's the growth. That's the freedom, is being able to make a choice, and to respond in a way that gives you that value system, that talks to that value system in yourself and with your husband. Like, this is our choice, and this feels right for us.
Yeah. Wow. Excellent. So let's see here. I don't know how long, did you have another exercise, did you say, or something else that you wanted to walk us through? I couldn't remember. I apologize.
I don't, but I can always come up on the spot with something. Always. And actually, I do have something that I would love to share. Let me make sure that I have access to it. Oh, I do. And we can do this as a mindfulness practice. But I have a poem that I like to share with you all that is about birth. And it's about motherhood. And especially with Mother's Day coming up, I think that remembering the growth, not only in poetry and mindfulness practices, but also, in the honoring of being a mother is so important. So if you let me, I'll read this poem and kind of take you through a practice with that. That's okay.
Excellent. Yes, great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. No problem. All right. So again, if we can find our meditative positions, this time I want you to be as comfortable as possible. If it feels right for you, again, go ahead and close your eyes. If not, and you just want to have a soft gaze to the floor, that's completely fine. Whatever feels safer and more honorable to you. As you close those eyes, signaling the breath again, breathing in and breathing out. Giving your body and your mind permission to relax and be comfortable. Taking the time to detach and reattach to the words that I'm about to read to you today. This poem is called Before I Awoke. As you hear the words, just see what comes up for you. Before I awoke by Climbing Poetry. In the depth of darkness, I spun around the sun. I followed the beat of a heart like dancers to drums. I caught spirit in the womb. I named myself God because she was I, and I made my way into flesh and bone. I grew no wings, so I borrowed song. I pushed, transforming her ribs so I could grow. She let me. I had only a memory of this place where land is shifted and destroyed for gold. I shifted her hips so I could grow, and she let me. She was the breath my lungs didn't know. She was the water my body grew to resemble. But this drought in my throat got me wondering if she'll make it past my ability to remember. First cries are premonitions to life. Before I woke up, I remembered. I was born of ions, nucleus, and cellular. I was microscopic and universal. I spun around the sun. In the depth of darkness, I followed the beat of a heart like dancers to drums. I caught spirit in her womb. Gently allowing those words to find their way to your heart center. You slowly open your eyes and bring yourself back into the room.
That was beautiful. Yes, thank you. I think you're the writer of that.
Yes, so this is Climbing Poetry, and this is by Alexa Garcia. Yes.
Okay, Alexa Garcia.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Thank you. Thank you. So is that a book that you reference for some of your meditations? And okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that that's important too, to think about, meditation, mindfulness is not just one thing, it's so many. And we can use so many different forms, specifically poetry, music, physically, sculpting, painting, to help us be in the moment. And I love, love, love using poetry as a way. And Climbing Poetry, I love all of the things they do. And so I do use this book a lot, having presentations or workshops.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that and giving, us another idea on ways that we can be mindful. So I'm trying to recap, I think oftentimes, at least when I think about self-care, I think, bubble bath, spa, those are just things that I feel like I have time for myself and I can take a moment, right? When I was pregnant, and I was, doing the hypnobirthing, I would love taking baths. Normally I hate taking baths, but I would love taking a bath and putting on some relaxing music and doing my affirmations and just, thinking about the things that I wanted to do. And so we talked about journaling, and now we're talking about poetry, right? And you were saying artwork, but music, right, can be maybe another. Okay, so let's go through some of these different options, or because I want to give people ideas. I don't want them to be stuck in, it has to be this way, or this is what I see. Let's give them options so that they can explore.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. So I'll start with the normal things that we see out there, which is usually breathing practices. And I'll say that the reason why we use the breath as often as we do in meditation and mindfulness is because the breath is always there. Like, as long as you're going to be alive, you'll have a breath. So it's, it's accessible, it's free. You don't have to pay anyone to breathe. And because of that, it's inclusive. So, the breath is always something that you can kind of come back to and anchor. Breath work, meditation where you focus on a sound a word, a mantra, or affirmation, right? So having the opportunity to close your eyes, focus in, and repeat a word, phrase, or mantra, whether that be today I will be brave. And you repeat that for the 5 minutes that you have a meditation. That's absolutely a form of mindfulness. Mindful walking or walking meditation. So again, if people don't feel honorable in sitting down, if they feel like they get jittery and it's just really hard to focus in on whatever their anchor is for that moment, getting up and using the legs or the feet as an anchor is a really, really great way of practicing this. So mindful walking. Also the body scan. So when we're having a lot of physical responses to stimulus, especially stress, like when I find myself really stressed out, I'll do a body scan and find out where in my body I'm feeling it. Because usually that'll signal to me what's really happening. If I feel it in my stomach, usually I'm nervous or excited, right? If I feel it, in my legs, and that could mean that I'm stressed out about something. So knowing where your stress responses lie in your body, being able to call them out and then soothe them is a practice as well. But again, being creative is like one of my favorite things ever when it comes to this work. So if you use poetry or use song, one of my favorite ways to kind of come into the moment, one of my favorite mindfulness practices is creating playlists for myself and literally lying down and letting the playlist go and me just kind of let the music take me. And that's a form because you're focusing in solely on that playlist. And so anything that you can do where you can focus on the present moment, when you can focus in and hone in on an anchor is a mindful practice, which I think is really cool. Trying to think of anything else that's creative that I'm missing. I know art is a really good way, music, poetry, journaling is really good. Anything that we do that we feel is mundane, cooking. And actually cooking is something that's ancient, that's been around for a long time as a meditative practice. If you listen to a lot of indigenous and African diaspora folks, they'll tell you that cooking is a form of meditative practice for their cultures. And so again, culturally finding what feels right for you, because this isn't new for you either. You have had something in your life that reminded you of what we just did. Tapping back into that, being creative and tapping back into those childhood things, those cultural things that are to be true for you. Mindfulness itself is not a religion. It is a practice or a skill set of being in the moment. However, in every ancient or wisdom tradition that I know of personally, this has shown up. So prayer, for example, is a form of being, meditative or having a practice of mindfulness. So again, be creative, figure out what feels right for you. And when you do that, practice it and let it take over and see what you notice when you're done with those practices.
Excellent. Thank you. As we think about people who are just starting out, may not know, again, where to start. So we're giving them that insight. What happens when you get distracted? So you're, right, you're saying maybe your affirmation or whatever, and then you're like, oh, I need to do the dishes or I need to do whatever, right? Because again, we're talking about parents, and I can tell you as a parent myself, I'm constantly thinking about all the things that I need to do, right? All the things, the grocery list, the garbage bins are outside, I need to bring them in. What's my son up to? All these things. And so I feel like when we have that time, sometimes it is, again, it's like, it's hard to think about yourself. And then even in this time where you're trying to center, right, on your thoughts, they can go elsewhere. So how do you bring your back?
So that is the secret. That's the secret sauce to this. So you just, you're pulling things apart. So I mentioned earlier that so many people think they're doing this wrong. Like so many people are like, I cannot be mindful. I cannot meditate because I can't stop my thoughts. Wrong, right? That is not the goal. Okay. First of all, if you can call it a goal, we don't really have goals in mindfulness or meditation, but I guess the intention is not to stop thoughts. You know why we have thoughts? Because we're alive. So we're going to always have some sort of thought, some sort of distraction. It is our body's way of receiving data and of processing it, period. Because of that, we can't stop those things. What we can do, though, is to try as much as possible to notice them. So what you're doing when you practice this this mindful meditation, this mindfulness, is to strengthen the observing mind and not the thinking mind. So the thing is what we do most of the time, just like you talked about. You know, we're cooking and then all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to take the trash out. I need to do that. And so that thinking mind goes off. Now I'm ruminating about all these other things that I need to be doing on my to-do list, right? What mindfulness teaches us to do is to take a pause and to see that thought, to note it, to greet it, and then come back to the anchor. So giving ourselves the opportunity to observe the thought, it's a practice of observing instead of interacting with it. So I like to think of it as a theater. How in most of our days, most of the day, we are the player, we are the actor, we are the script, we are all those things. All of our thoughts, all of who we are on the stage all the time interacting with each other. Mindfulness gives us the opportunity to step off of the stage, to be in the audience, and to watch those thoughts so that we go back on stage and then decide how we want to then change the script or interact with the script. Right? When your thoughts get lost, if I'm a newbie and my thoughts start to wander, great, fine, not a problem. And first, be compassionate and kind to yourself. That's also a foundation of mindfulness. Not a problem. Great, I noticed. Noticing is what is the point. Notice the thought. You can find a way to that thought. So a lot of people think about putting a thought in a bubble or having it be a cloud, and that way it's tangible in our minds. And then you float away, right? Or you pop the bubble and you bring that focus back to your anchor. So if we're doing a breathing practice, I'm thinking about the fact that I need to feed my cats. I see the thought, I put it in a bubble, I pop that thought, and I bring my focus back to the breath. I'm doing it right. That's the point. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And so practicing that over and over again helps us to do that better in life. Helps us to, we're done with doing these formal practices. When we show up into the game of life, we have a better understanding of how to observe those thoughts and actions so that we can interact with them better when we're on the other side of it. So that's the sauce. That's the secret question, and such a wonderful question when it comes to how to really engage in these practices.
Yeah, because I think oftentimes, right, especially when it's not, no, we're not really sure what we're supposed to do, right? And it goes back to this, there is no right or wrong, right? It's whatever is right for you, right? And so, but then people get in their heads and they're like, well, you know, and I'm doing all these things and I'm thinking, you know, and so I think just bringing that to the forefront and saying, that's okay. You know, that's okay that those things are probably going to happen, especially as you start. So be aware, but bring yourself back into that moment.
And actually, I'm glad you said that because it'll probably happen more as you start. So that's the other piece is we don't notice our thoughts on a day-to-day basis. Once you start telling yourself, be quiet, let me start, focusing, those thoughts are going to flood into your mind. And that's when people really think they're doing it wrong. It's like, no, you're doing it right. I'm telling you. You just
right. Yes.
Thoughts, So.
I like that. Yes. Okay. Excellent. Well, we are close to time. This has been super helpful. I love spending this time with you, giving great insight onto mindfulness and, self-care for our parents, especially now while we're in, dealing with a pandemic on a level that no one has ever seen, right? COVID-19 is a very real thing. Parents are home with their kids 24/7. I am very much living that right now. And so, and I was noticing, especially in the beginning, it was a new routine. And so we all were adjusting, and I needed to recenter. I needed to refocus and say, this is how we're living right now, but how can I still feel good about myself? So I think these conversations are important for everyday living, but especially as we deal with stressful times, because the mechanisms, right, the things that we teach ourselves, we can go back to and we can fall on. And one of the really nice things about mindfulness is it doesn't take that much time. So that's what I just absolutely love. So you're a busy parent, you have time. I'm telling you right now, you have time to do this.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, this has been just amazingly insightful. Appreciate you reading that poem to us. It truly was beautiful. And, I'm glad that we were able to incorporate like a celebration of motherhood during this conversation. So thank you again for your time and just holding the space for us.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really, really happy to be here, and I'm here as a resource for anyone out there who would like to learn more about mindfulness, meditation, self-care, any work that involves this. Please let me know. I am happy to have conversations around this. So thank you for giving me the platform.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And her information is on the website. So visit today. All right, y'all. Take care. Happy Mother's Day to all of you. And we're thinking about you. Stay safe and take care. Well wishes. Bye.